I'm Megan Murphy. This is Bryony Dixon. We're hosting a talk on Saturday, September 14th at 6 p.m. in Victoria, BC about gender identity ideology, the impact on kids, parents, families, women's sports, women's rights, women's spaces. I have been talking about the conflict between gender identity ideology and women's rights for over a decade now. I came at this initially as a feminist and a leftist, in fact. I was a lifelong NDP voter, and when I first saw this coming down the pike, I thought, this is obviously going to nullify women's sex-based rights. So I tried to speak out against Bill C-16, which is Canada's gender identity legislation, in 2016 before the bill was passed, and no one wanted to hear it. I did not anticipate how bad this would get. I didn't anticipate what would happen to kids. I did not anticipate what would happen around men being transferred into women's prisons and sexually assaulting them in there. I didn't know how bad it was going to get, but I knew it would be bad. So I tried to speak out. I tried to write about it, and this conversation was actively suppressed. Now, we essentially have a prime minister who's invested in virtue signaling and little else. And, how dare he claim to be protecting women's rights when he is allowing this to happen to women and refusing to listen to the women who are speaking out?
So when I realized that this is an issue that no one could speak about, artists couldn't speak about it, I was presenting the Nanaimo Fringe Festival, and it came to my attention that the New York Fringe cancelled a spoken word poet for putting "there are men and women" in the blurb for their poem. And that was too much, right? So as soon as I see this ideological creep into institutions like the Fringe, which is supposed to allow fringe art to be made, and so now it's definitely the opposite. The types of things that are allowed at the Fringe are anything that the corporations are agreeing with or the state is agreeing with. It's completely been inverted. Putting on these events like the one on Saturday is really an opportunity for me, as someone that likes to platform that space for those other viewpoints. It's something I'm really passionate about. Free expression, free speech. If people are concerned about hate speech, the answer to that is more speech. Come along, voice your opinions, voice your side of things, and hear what we have to say, and hopefully we can develop some solutions together, because there are some really valid concerns on this side of the issue. And the Q&A in particular is always one of my favorite parts, because you hear these amazing community perspectives, and then you look to your right and you realize, oh, there's my neighbor, and they think the same thing, but because of the algorithms and the way the online environment is manipulated, we can't find each other. It's very difficult to find each other, and these events are a place where you can build that community and work through issues together.
I know a lot of Canadians have concerns about gender identity ideology. I know a lot of parents who have concerns about what's being taught in schools, how they have concerns about We've seen in the UK and in the US that the transitioning of children is experimental, it's dangerous, it's being done without consent, that kids are being pushed through these processes extremely quickly. They're minors, they're not equipped to make these decisions that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives. These kids are being sterilized, their bodies are being mutilated before they understand really what reproduction means, what sex means.
And if we're teaching our children untruths and ideology in schools that create blind spots around certain rights for different vulnerable groups, then I don't think that's a good direction for education to be taking.
What's interesting, in my experience, about my attempts to have this conversation, to speak about my views, is that I'm consistently shut down, threatened, harassed, vilified, smeared. I've been smeared by the CBC multiple times. I think Carol Off compared me to a Holocaust denier. And, the people who I've witnessed being very hateful and very violent and very dangerous are the people who are trying to shut down our speech. So we host these events. They're always peaceful. They're respectful. There's dissent. We welcome everyone. I think it's great when people come and disagree and we can have those conversations. Canada's particularly bad. I'm from Vancouver, and I lived in Vancouver and was living in Vancouver while I was doing these talks around Canada and around the world, and was, harassed and threatened and stalked in my neighborhood. Never mind what happens at our events, which is really scary. I spoke at the Million March for Kids in September last year in Victoria at the legislature, and it was terrifying. I was cut off a few minutes into my talk because the activists were hurling themselves at the stage and assaulting people in the crowd. One of them assaulted a cop. There were elders in the crowd who were assaulted and knocked over. There were kids there. People on the island had come to listen to what we had to say, to march peacefully. These events and rallies went off peacefully all across Canada, except for Victoria, where, literally busloads of hundreds and hundreds of activists were shipped in to threaten and scare and intimidate and silence and in some cases assault people. And, this was essentially ignored by the media. It was ignored by our governments. I'm just a woman. I'm just a woman. I'm not anybody. I don't have any institutional backing, I'm just trying to talk about this, and to treat me as this danger and this enemy, or Bryony, who's just, a single mom who wants to talk about these issues. To treat us as somehow dangerous or threatening when the opposite is true. We're in real danger when we try to talk about this. It's very dangerous. People are very scary and threatening.
And I don't think we have access to the $10,000 anti-hate safety grants that the BC government give out.
No, we didn't get. I think that the Canadian government gave Pride like $3 million or something like that in an emergency funding to protect them from some supposed threat from the far right or from the anti-gender activists. As though anyone in Canada has ever tried to shut down a Pride parade. I think a lot of Canadians don't know what to do, and they don't know where to go. They feel upset about this, but they don't know who they can talk to. They're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to be accused of hate speech, maybe dragged through a human rights tribunal. They're afraid of what their neighbor might think or what their coworkers might think. So we want to bring people together and show Canadians, there are lots of Canadians, there's lots of people who have concerns about this. It's okay to talk about this. We are going to talk about this. And we do need to do something. It's quite urgent. It's sort of now or never. We need to stop this before it continues. It's already gotten way too far as it is. Anyone can come. What we do is we do a panel discussion. So we have myself, Bryony, we have Linda Blade, who's been very outspoken in terms of protecting women and girls' sports in Canada. We have Mia Hughes, who's the author of the WPATH Files. We have Magdalena Houston, who is a young detransitioner who's going to speak about her experience being caught up in the trans cult and escaping, and how she was treated when she did escape and extricate herself from this activist movement, and just spoke out about her experiences, which were really negative. Then we do an hour of Q&A, and those are always very fruitful. I just feel like a lot of people feel really silenced around this issue, and it's because they have been silenced. We've all been silenced, and so we're trying to do this event in Victoria, where the legislature is, to remind the politicians who've ignored us, the Canadian media who's ignored us, the institutions that have ignored us, that we have valid concerns and we're not going to shut up about it, and we're not going to run away, and we're not going to live in fear, and we want to encourage and galvanize and inspire other Canadians to speak out about this as well.
Well, courage is contagious. So every time we do one of these talks, we always hear from people that say that we've emboldened them to be able to speak up. They've been wanting to speak up for a long time. That's a sign that things are not going well in your society, when you're too scared to talk about an issue that affects you. And we endeavor to create a place where you can come and have discourse and dialogue. Sometimes that means there might be an opinion that upsets you or is different to your opinion. But the point is that we can hash those things out together as a community and come to some sort of middle ground where we can all have our voices heard.
We'll be in Victoria Saturday, September 14th, 2024. That's this year. We really hope to see as many of you out as possible. We want to show the government that this is an issue that matters to us, that matters to Canadians, that we can't be ignored, and we want to inspire people to speak out. We want people to feel galvanized, to feel emboldened, to meet their neighbors, their community members. This shouldn't be something that's scary to talk about. And frankly, nothing should be. We don't yet live under a dictatorship, so let's do some democracy, some free speech, some free thought. We live in a free society, we're told, so let's remind the government of that.